Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of Space Warfighter Talks. I'm your host, Bill Wolf, the president and founder of the Space Force Association. And we're honored to have with us today the commander of Space Delta IV, Colonel Rich Bourquin. Colonel Bourquin, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again, and it's good to be a part of what Space Force Association is doing to support the stand-up of Space Force. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Before we get started, we got quite a few questions to get through today. I always like to ask folks a little bit about their background. Would you mind telling the audience, a little bit about your career and what has led you to your current position as the commander of Space Delta IV?
Absolutely. So, I'm a 96 graduate of the University of Texas, went through ROTC, got my commission there. My first assignment straight into space operations was working defense support program at the European ground station. That was my first assignment. It's also a missile warning assignment, which we'll see will be kind of a thread as you go throughout my career, leading to where I am now. After that, went to Malmstrom Air Force Base to be a missileer. That was when we were still doing the cross-flow of space and missile operations. Then went to weapons school, where you got to be my instructor. I had the privilege of being one of your students. Learned a lot there. Went to Korea from there and really started a period of quite a bit of space integration. So I've got a lot of kind of tactical space integration flavor throughout my career as well. So I did that in Korea, followed that with an assignment to Headquarters Air Mobility Command, again working space tactics and space integration. Did a fair amount of integration of space with mobility assets in theater, things like Joint Precision Airdrop System, some different beyond line of sight communication system, those kind of things for air mobility platforms. Then I kind of went into a little bit of a detour in my career, did international affairs. So I did my staff college in India for a year and did a follow-on in Pacific Air Forces, doing international relations, that kind of thing. After that, came back into space operations and what was then Air Force Base Command after pretty good amount of time out of Air Force Base Command. Came back to be the Director of Operations here at Buckley at the 460th Operations Support Squadron. So again, coming back into missile warning. From there, got picked up to be Squadron Commander at the Weapons School. Spent 4 years at Nellis, 2 years as a commander of a weapons squadron, 328th Weapons Squadron, running the space and cyber weapons instructor courses. Then 2 years as the Deputy Group Commander for the Adversary Tactics Group, which gave me a pretty strong background in aggressors and a lot of the things that are going on at Nellis, red flag, that sort of thing. Followed that at Offutt Air Force Base at United States Strategic Command, and then got picked up to come back to Buckley as the Vice Wing Commander of the 460th Space Wing. And then as we stood up Space Force, had the privilege of being selected to be the first commander of Space Delta IV, bringing together all missile warning operations in Space Force under a single organization. That's where I am today.
Phenomenal. What a great background to bring you to this position where you're at now and bringing all those different capabilities together and then having all the insights from all the experiences you gained throughout your career. What a tremendous group of experiences. And that really gets into the specifics of the questions. And Space Delta IV assumed the mission of the 21st and 460th Space Wings. What have been your greatest challenges in bringing these two units together?
Right. So, when we figured out how we were going to organize this and what weapon systems were going to fall into Space Delta IV, I was obviously very excited at the idea of bringing both the ground-based and space-based pieces together. They haven't been in the same organization for 15, 20 years, and even then, so when I was doing DSP as a lieutenant, the ground-based radars were in a different space group, but still all under the 21st Space Wing. So so they were the same wing, but still different groups. This is the first time that I know of that we've brought them all together under a single commander. So different squadron commanders, space and ground-based, under a single commander. So very exciting opportunity for me, especially someone who's been involved with missile warning for so much of my career. But the real challenge that I was concerned with going into it was, how do I integrate the ground-based radars most effectively? We are headquartered here at Buckley Air Force Base, which is where the space-based units reside. And so it's very easy to kind of assume that we're going to take what used to be the 460th Operations Group out of the 460th Space Wing, and we're going to staple some ground-based radars on it, and we're going to call it good. And that's That's not what I wanted at all. I'm very sensitive to, my squadron commanders at the ground-based radar sites, and how do they perceive this organization? What's in it? How are we supporting them? So I've really made a deliberate effort to, not make the Space Delta IV a direct extension of the 460th Operations Group. It's not. It's elements of the 460th Operations Group and elements of the old 21st Operations Group brought together in a completely new unit. And ground and space base are, equal players and equal contributors to that effort. Not only is this a unit, or are these units that are coming into what they feel like is an organization that was already kind of, based here and kind of comes from a space-based background, but they're all geographically separated, right? And so they're kind of far from the flagpole. So, we laid out as we were building this a very deliberate plan of how are we going to get out to each of those units, meet face-to-face with those commanders, make sure that we have good communications with all of them, and that we can have staff meetings and ops intel updates, all those kind of normal battle rhythm events where they feel like equal players and that they weren't just kind of added on at the last minute. That's been a challenge. COVID-19 has made that a ridiculous challenge to some extent. It's really complicated our ability to go travel and see them. I've gotten to 3 of the radar sites so far, but again, COVID continues to move on and continues to make that a challenge. And then just technologically, it's amazing to see how little common communication there is amongst all these sites. We're all part of Air Force Space Command previously. But it was still very difficult to say, hey, I want to have a video teleconference at this classification level, and then to realize that each of those squadrons had completely different methods of doing that, and they weren't compatible. So we're working through that. We're trying to put some effort into buying common systems that everyone can talk on, and until we get to that, finding kind of that lowest common denominator of communications to make sure that every commander feels like they have an equal voice at the table, and if that means we're all kind of put on less desired communications, at least we're all on the same baseline and we're all talking and working through the same problems together. So that stays forefront in my mind in everything we do, operationally, administratively, support, all those things. Am I supporting the ground-based radar sites to the same extent that the space-based squadrons are, here close to the flagpole? And sometimes we don't quite meet the mark, and I've asked them to give me good feedback on when I don't see it, if I hit a blind spot. They've done a great job of really starting to trust me and build those relationships, and amongst the squadron commanders to all kind of get on the same playing field. And it's been good. It's been a challenge.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, you've got units that span the entire globe. Some of our listeners and viewers may not be familiar with the geography of Space Delta IV. Can you give them some perspective on the geographic reach of your command?
Absolutely. So I'll kind of work inside out here. So the Delta itself is headquartered here at Buckley Air Force Base. We have 3 squadrons resident here at Buckley Air Force Base. We have our 2 space-based sensor squadrons, the 2nd and 11th Space Warning Squadrons. We have an operations support squadron, the 460th OSS, that supports all of the other squadrons, so both space and ground-based. So all that's resident here at Buckley. Additionally, we still have we have some operating locations down at Peterson Air Force Base and at Schriever Air Force Base, basically smaller elements that support some additional operations that we do. Then moving away from the front range, I'll kind of go west to east, I guess. So we have one of our primary weapon systems is the upgraded early warning radar system. We have locations at Beale Air Force Base in California, 7th Space Warning Squadron. Up at Clear Air Force Station, Alaska, that's the 13th Space Warning Squadron. Moving east a good ways, up in Thule, Greenland, we have the 12th Space Warning Squadron. And then a little further south on the east coast, we've got the 6th Space Warning Squadron at Cape Cod Air Force Station. Additionally, for the upgraded early warning radars, we have a partnership with RAF Fylingdales in the United Kingdom. They don't work directly for me, but we're very close partners working the same weapon system, and we definitely consider them part of the close family. The next radar system we have is the Parks radar at Cavalier Air Force Station, North Dakota. That's the 10th Space Warning Squadron. That's the perimeter acquisition and perimeter acquisition radar and attack characterization system. It's a great acronym. So that's at Cavalier. That's kind of a one-off. That's a single weapon or a single instance of that weapon system. And then we also have, if I go back to Clear Air Force Station, they support the Cobra Dane radar, which is out on Shemya Island, Erickson Air Force Station. It's about as close to Russia as you can get without leaving the United States. We have, lastly, I will highlight in Germany, we have a detachment that at Capone Air Force Station that provides SATCOM services to some of our other squadrons. So if you kind of go, far west at Shemya, Alaska, to far east, Capone, Germany, it's pretty broad range of geographic space that's Space Delta 4 fills there.
That is a lot of ground to cover. And I suspect your staff meetings have to be set up so that you've got multiple staff meetings throughout the day just to make sure folks are up to speed on specific information that you need to get out.
So we found that 10:30 in the morning is kind of the sweet spot that I can get everybody from Alaska to Germany, and nobody's up too early or up too late. We have to maintain awareness of those time changes because it's, we don't, again, just that perception of when you call a meeting and not being aware of somebody's geography, it shows that you're not thinking about them. So it's a deliberate decision of when we hold meetings.
And kind of a follow-up question, how many folks are in Space Delta 4?
So when you add up military, civilian, and contractors, it's roughly 800 folks. Okay. I think it's the largest by a good bit of all the Space Deltas.
That's a large number, but covering a large area.
It is.
In a very important mission set. Space Delta 4 uses a variety of technologies to provide strategic and theater missile warning for the United States and its allies. Why is it important to partner with our allies on missile warning?
Yeah, so I'd kind of, if I divide up missile warning between strategic and theater warning, I think there's great reasons we need allies on kind of both of those sides. I'll tell you, every single squadron I have currently has at least one allied partner nation with personnel in that squadron. So all of the ground-based radars have Canadians in the squadrons. My space-based squadrons have Australians, Canadians, and folks from the Royal Air Force from the United Kingdom. So again, it is truly a very much a partnership with our allied partners there. So from the strategic side, and definitely the defense of North America, that's really all under the purview of North American Air Defense Command, NORAD, and that is a joint or a combined, United States and Canadian effort. And so that's why we have Canadians all throughout those ground-based radars, which are providing kind of that terminal attack assessment into the United States. But I think, if you look at it, strategic missile warning is inherently international, right? I mean, we're talking about, long-range nuclear weapons on, ICBMs coming across that certainly could threaten the United States, but could threaten Canada, and would drastically change the international community forever if something like that ever actually happened. And so, again, I think inherently international, and I think certainly our closest allies look to us to kind of provide that infrastructure and that kind of foundation of warning that if something were to happen of that nature, we would know about it, and they would be partners in that. They would get that information, and in some cases they are operating those systems that provide that information. So again, inherently international on the strategic side. On the theater side, if you look at how we usually fight in theaters, it's going to be a coalition effort. And if you go back to Desert Storm, you're going to see that the key to really holding that coalition, certainly in Desert Storm, was those Scud attacks, and being able to let coalition nations in theater know when attacks were happening at the theater level. If you look back at that, I think that's a key player. And that's continued on through Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, and all the operations we currently have going on. They are all, that warning that we provide from a theater perspective, it is given out to all of the coalition partners and allies that are in that theater, and so it directly goes to protecting the lives of those personnel. And so, those shared early warning agreements that go on in theater operations are again key to, I think, holding those coalitions together. And I think you can even, if you look at what happened in January, when the Iranians launched some short and close range ballistic missiles from Iran into Iraq at bases there, and that warning provided by elements of what's now Space Delta IV. That warning certainly saved American lives, but it's also provided to our international partners. And so, that gives them an ability to protect themselves, and it builds that trust between us as a coalition. So again, I think strategic and theater, allies are a key part of that. And certainly with our closest allies, where we can have them truly intertwined in our operations, I think it makes it much more effective, and that trust is really impossible to erode. And I'll tell you that the partners that we have, certainly in the units of Space Delta IV, they send us, no doubt, their best and brightest. And often, those countries don't have maybe a space operations career field. So we're getting folks from other operational career fields, a lot of times from aviation career fields. But they get here, they learn it, they figure it out, and they become expert operators. And we integrate them completely, just like a U.S. space operator. If they excel, they become flight commanders, they become chiefs of training, stand eval, whatever jobs we have. If they're the ones that are qualified to do it, they are looked at just like a U.S. operator if we have an opportunity to get them into those positions. And I'm always just amazed at how much they excel when they get here. And so, yeah, we absolutely couldn't do it without them.
And could you expound on the time that you had in Korea? Because right after weapons school, you went out to Korea, and talk a little bit about that practical experience you had there and how that helps you command the current organization here.
Sure. So, I mean, from an allied perspective, Korea is a great place to kind of be in a real pressure cooker of having to learn how to fight with allies against a very a common and understood enemy. I mean, that conflict in Korea has been going on for 60 years plus now, and there's truly a foundation of brotherhood with the Republic of Korea. And at Osan Air Base, where I was, they were right there in the Air Operations Center with you. And if you knew if you were, to tie it back to missile warning, you knew if you were getting attacked that you were both taking the same incoming rounds. There was no discrimination between Korean and American. We were all under attack there together. And so it was very much a common effort. And especially there where it's, you're coming to them, you're on their home turf, and this is an existential threat to them. And so to really see it through their eyes and understand that you're there to help, and that you've got an international role, but this is their home, and they don't rotate out in a year, right? This problem's never leaving for them. It's always going to be there for them, until it gets solved someday, hopefully. But that threat of attack is real. It's existential, and their families are there. Everybody's there, and to see how they interact and how they deal with that threat, and then how you can best interact with them to be more effective and to prevent or to provide a better deterrent to a potential attack. I think that really gets ingrained in you about what our allies mean to us, and vice versa. And then so when you come here and you've got allied partners on the floor, it's I really feel a sense of responsibility, a sense of pride to have those guys feel at home here, to feel like they are part of the team, and to feel like they have every opportunity to excel and be recognized, just like an American space professional or airman, whoever's filling that position. And so I love it. And again, with the time I've also had in Pacific Air Forces doing international relations, there's truly a brotherhood of freedom across the world, and people identify that, and they want to. Everybody wants to do right by their families and have the ability to enjoy those freedoms in whatever context of their country. And so, it's been a great part of my career, and it's fantastic that I continue to have a role in that, in those international relations and partnerships here at Space Delta IV.
Completely understandable. Tremendous responsibility, and it's great to be able to, like you said, have those continued relationships with those partners. For those unfamiliar with the missile warning mission, what is the value of using multiple layered technologies for the missile warning mission?
Right. So especially the strategic missile warning mission, we need that to be what we call perfect warning, right? We want to know if our sensors and our crews say, hey, there's a missile coming at the United States or an ally, that warning has to be perfect. That actually has to be a thing that is happening and we are under attack. And so one of the ways we do that is something called dual phenomenology, right? So we want to be able to tell the president, our national senior leaders that we think we're being attacked, and we think we're being attacked because we've seen it with different kinds of technology. And so that gives some confidence that, hey, there's not some fluke with just this specific type of technology. So, whether that's space-based and ground-based, so if I see it with a space-based IR sensor, I think I know what's happening. And then if I see it coming in on a radar, which is a totally different type of technology, I have a high level of confidence that we're not being spoofed, that this is not some kind of natural phenomenon. I have two very different types of sensors telling me that something is actually happening, and I have very high confidence that I can tell a national senior leader that yes, we are under attack. It doesn't have to be space-based and ground-based. It can be multiple different types of space-based sensors. Certainly we have satellites in different types of orbits, right? We have satellites in different orbital positions. And so if I can see it from different locations, it gives me, again, more confidence that it is not some sort of anomaly on a specific sensor. Multiple sensors in different positions and in different, it could be in different types of orbit. They're all telling me the same thing, then I feel much more confident that is indeed an attack on the United States. Now, if you look at it kind of, again, from a theater side, there we're less concerned with being perfect. We call it, we're striving for assured warning. So we want to know that if a missile gets launched, we want to be able to tell folks downrange that they need to duck and cover and protect themselves. We're a little more able to be wrong there. If I could, we don't want to be wrong ever, sure. But I'm willing to take a risk to be wrong just in case that was a real attack. My threshold, my confidence threshold goes down a bit, that I don't have to be as confident, because I'd rather than duck and cover and not need to, than not tell them to duck and cover when they do need to. And so again, using different types of technology, layered technology. Every technology is going to have some vulnerabilities, right? It's going to have some things that maybe it doesn't see as well. Maybe it's just not designed to detect. So if you can use different technologies, usually they're going to be able to complement each other to some degree, where something that's not seen from one side will be seen by the other side. And so I can get out warning, on the theater side, I can get out warning maybe with lower confidence, but I'm pretty sure I saw something and I can get somebody to protect themselves. In far more cases than if I just have one type of sensor or one, looking at it from one angle, right? So the more I can provide of that and kind of layer those technologies, the more chance that something that's harder to see or harder to detect, the more chance I'm going to have of seeing it and being able to provide that assured warning for theater.
Great. Thank you, sir. That's, again, tremendous responsibility. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit.
Okay.
And I'd like to talk about the importance of culture development. Yeah. Because honestly, as this new service stands up, I always use the analogy back to the last time a new service stood up back in '47, where we were just coming off of World War II. And it was understood what the capabilities were that we needed, the expertise that we needed in the airmen to do their job. So you've got kind of a tremendous responsibility. It's good that we're not coming off of a world war. That's really what we're trying to prevent by standing up the new service. And so as the Space Delta IV commander, it must be exciting to see the units develop and the newest sessions join the Space Force. What qualities are you hoping the recruiters seek in the new space professionals? And then we're going to talk just a little bit about how that culture can further be developed.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a different generation, certainly than when we were coming through the service and as young lieutenants and captains. And I am constantly amazed at the things that the young space professionals and airmen, officers, analysts, the problems that they are itching to solve, and the ideas that they come up with. I really feel like my job, I'm not coming up with the good ideas. They're coming up with them. I'm just trying to get things out of their way and helping them to make those solutions happen. And so the people that we need in Space Force now, and I think you see this from what you hear the CSO, he describes the Space Force as lean and agile, forward-leaning. Those are the people we're looking for. People with agility of thought. People that are able to take a vague situation, analyze it, critically think about it, and come up with solutions that were not necessarily, in the PME guide that they were given to study before they became certified. Right. Look at problem sets in a different way. I would definitely say that I'm trying to, and this is something I'm trying to build within Space Delta 4, but people that want to take some risks. I don't think anyone would say that the old Air Force Space Command was great at taking risks. Sometimes we shied away from risk, and I think and that's what you hear from the senior leaders. We have to learn how to take risks. And so I want people that can look at a problem set, analyze the risk involved, determine if it's something they can do at their level. Maybe that risk needs to go up a few levels, but they need to be willing to think about taking that risk and not be afraid to push that up for decision if it's not at their level. And if it is at their level, take the risk. As leaders, though, that means the other half of risk is failure, right? And so I've told my squadron commanders, hey, if it's something that's at your level, assess the risk, work through the problem set, and if it's your risk to take it. And if you fail, okay, learn something from it, get better. You may want to tell me about it at some point, especially if it's failure, just so we can understand it. But my promise to them is I won't overreact to anything. We'll talk about it. If I don't feel like they assess the risk properly, I'll talk to them about that. But I want to see them take risks, and we need to push that down to the lowest level, where people are leading at that lowest level, and they're hungry to lead at the lowest level, and then that'll grow up, throughout the ranks. And kind of lastly, I want to push a little bit of, we need diversity. In those people that are coming into the Space Force. I worry a little bit when we talk about the importance of STEM education for the Space Force. I think that's important. We've got to have a fluency in STEM, but there's certainly a concern of does that automatically start to exclude people that either haven't had that opportunity or have pursued other opportunities, and are we creating like a single model of space professional? Because if all of us start to look the same, or we grew up thinking the same, we're not going to be as effective. Now, I know the Space Force has some programs to kind of stimulate STEM education in kind of non-traditional or areas of the country that have not that don't have such high recruiting numbers, and maybe where STEM education is not being as successful. And so I think they're aware of that, but we have to be careful. That we're not just trying to create, an army of clones that eventually all think the same and aren't effective. So, those are the kind of people that's what we need to find in people, and entice them to join the Space Force.
Understand. I'd like to circle back a little bit to some experiences that you've had in the past, especially, a really good model I think that we can adopt, or the Space Force can adopt from the Air Force, and that is that testing tactics training model that you were very familiar with working down at Nellis Air Force Base, not only as the 328th Weapons Squadron Commander, but also as the Deputy Adversary Tactics Group Commander. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how the beginning with the threat in mind really helps produce and create that culture of the space warfighter that you're probably looking for?
Absolutely. So that time at Nellis for me, and it was really, Nellis is a crucible. I know you were stationed there. It is a meat grinder, because as you're going through web school classes and red flags and all that advanced training, it wears you down. But I loved it. When I finished 4 years of it, I didn't realize how tired I was, but it was fantastic. And I really think the things I learned there and the things that were ingrained in my brain, those are things that I'll never forget, and it's very much shaped who I became as an officer and even as a person. But you're right, and I was there at Nellis at a fantastic time where, as a command, Air Force Space Command, and some of the senior leaders that are now senior leaders in U.S. Space Force were coming up as wing commanders and brigadier generals, and just starting, getting to that really senior leader, kind of getting into the senior leader levels of then Air Force Space Command. And they really were starting to identify that as a command, we were basing operations around procedures rather than threats. And a lot of people, I think, at the lower levels understood that, and as they kind of drifted up, it just never became the priority to fix. And I started seeing that when I was at Nellis, and it was truly a great opportunity for me at the weapons school to work that into our curriculum. And then when I got to be a deputy group commander with the adversary tactics group, to really help stand up how do we know, teach, and replicate that threat to space forces, again, at the time in Air Force Base Command. And so, again, starting with that threat in mind, like you said, and working forward of what do we need to do to meet those threats? How do we threat react in a space system, right? And these are things that at Nellis are just in the lifeblood of the youngest pilot, right? These brand new pilots, that's all they've known is how to operate their aircraft in these enemy environments and how to keep themselves alive. And we never did that as space operators growing up. As a young lieutenant flying DSP satellites, I didn't even think about it. It was just there, right? I got the data, I analyzed the data, I was great at that. But if somebody was attacking the satellite, I would not have known where to start. I wouldn't even known what could be out there that could have threatened the satellite, right? And so it was truly I think a fantastic shift to move towards threat-based operations, understanding how we could be denied, and how to prevent that, how to react to that. Learning the timing of it, right? Because very different timing certainly than for aviators. Just learning the terminology. I mean, it was a change in so many things in our culture as space operators. New terminology, new ways of thinking and thinking about time and space, the physics of it. Again, I never knew anything about maneuvering two bodies in space towards each other growing up. I mean, it's not something we learned as young lieutenants. It wasn't a priority. So. And so I say all that, and then, going through and teaching students at the weapons school, really setting some foundational things that we're doing that have grown into things like Space Flag now. That there's a direct line to some of the missions that we developed at the weapons school at the 328th Weapons Squadron during that time. And again, it wasn't me. I didn't come up with this stuff. It was, some young captain instructors that had brought some experience with them from various points in the field and understood, where there were some resources, specifically in this case with industry, to build up some simulation capabilities, which became, now the simulators that we use for Space Flag. And, it's fantastic having, I did Space Flag I was actually at Space Flag when we stood up U.S. Space Force, and we brought out a cake and did a little celebration. But I was at that VOL as a space boss, and I'm just looking around at the problem set that these young officers and these young airmen at the time, space professionals now, the problem sets that they were working, it brought a tear to my eye. It was just fantastic to see them using a different, not just using the terminology that we learned from the Air Force to talk about, how we threat react, how we force package, all the things. There's a piece of that. But then taking that terminology and creating their own, real lexicon of terminology for warfighting. Right. And, that was my message to them as a space boss at the end of the VOL after they, had a few wins and took a lot of losses, because that's what you do. You take a lot of losses because that's how you learn, right? But I told them, hey, we're getting ready, they just announced that we're standing up a Space Force tomorrow, and we're all going to be in the Space Force at some point. And remember this, right? Remember the things you're doing here, because that's what success looks like in the Space Force. Taking the things you're learning now, growing on them, and just, making that second nature. I remember sitting with another colonel, another space operator, and we're sitting there in the front row, and they're explaining a specific rendezvous and proximity operation that's going on, and they're using all this terminology that I was not really familiar with, not having kind of ever had an assignment in RPO kind of system. And they all know what they're talking about. And this other 06 leans over and says, "Hey, do you know what they're talking about?" A little bit. I knew what they were talking about, but I couldn't have explained it myself for sure. And that's fantastic. That's exactly what we need. I definitely don't need to be the smartest guy in that room. I want all these other guys being the smartest guy in that room and coming up with solutions and just telling me how to get out of the way and let them succeed. So yeah, that culture, that's we can't lose that. And here's the thing, it is rooted in some of our Air Force culture, and I don't think we should try to lose that. We shouldn't run away from that. We should make it our own at some point. We need to grow it into our own. But I have a lot of pride in my time at Nellis and where that culture comes from, and bringing that warfighting culture into space and then letting it kind of grow organically from there. I think it's key, and that's something we just have to keep getting right.
Sir, I think that's a great prescription for advanced training here in the Space Force. So yeah, completely agree. And that really brings me to my next question about tactics. The missile warning mission has a long history and established tactics, yet there are important advances coming. What does the future of missile warning tactics look like?
Yeah, so that's again another great question, and it's something we're wrestling with. We're looking at when the ground-based radars were made part of this organization. I didn't have a real background with the ground-based radar, so I really wanted to understand what they were thinking. And the ground-based radars, they are a fantastic multi-mission sensor, right? So their primary mission is missile warning, and I've asked them to really latch onto that identity that they're a missile warners first. But they do tremendous work for space domain awareness. And it's important that they continue to do that. And so I never meant, when I talk about the mission of Space Delta IV, I only talk about missile warning because that's my primary mission. Those sensors do a lot of other things, and it's key that those other missions get done, and they get done well, because it makes us better at missile warning, right? It makes us better at using those sensors for that primary mission when it comes back to that. When I definitely felt there was a sense that these ground-based radars were, developed a long time ago, and they were a little bit of a relic, and that the missile warning mission was just something you kind of turned on and it did itself. And they were focusing only on kind of SDA. That was the sense I got, and maybe that's biased a little bit. And so I've really asked them to kind of refocus on what other tactical things can you do with that sensor energy, right? Great, your radar was designed to detect ballistic missiles 70 years ago. Well, we're 70 years later, and the threat is evolving, right? Potential adversaries are coming up with new tactics. We can't sit back and say, yep, I'm still just gonna click it on and it's gonna do its thing, right? And so we've got to figure out as the adversary potentially gets new capabilities that may not be in our sweet spot. We got to figure out how to turn those weaknesses into strengths. Technology is great, and technology is an easy answer sometimes. It's very hard to obtain sometimes, but it's an easy thing to say. Oh, we'll just get new technology, but it doesn't always work that way. And so we've got a lot of sensors. We have these sensors, and I really want the squadrons looking at how do they use that radar energy specifically to do other things. The same goes for our space-based squadrons. They've got sensors that are a little newer, but again, we're learning new ways to use that data and how to interpret that data. And then I need those, both of those sides of the delta to come together and figure out how do they feed each other. Because you would be surprised at how little they're able to talk to each other right now. And so that's something we're working on. And then even beyond that, we've got, you may have heard of many of the things that like the Missile Defense Agency is working on. They're talking about these massive numbers of satellites in a space layer that can, use different technologies to see these different kinds of threats. I do expect that's going to come down the road at some point, and I fully expect that we'll be a part of that in some way. I'm not sure how yet. But even before we get to that, the Missile Defense Agency also has lots of radars, including the Carbidane radar, which we support very closely. And they're building the long-range discrimination radar up at Clear, Alaska, which will be another Missile Defense Agency asset. And when I look at some of the things those new radars can do, used in conjunction with the missile warning radars, those missile defense radars, and then even some of the space domain awareness capabilities, if we can piece those things together, I think there's some real untapped potential. Right now, you'll see that that data tends to channel into one of three channels. It goes missile warning, it goes missile defense, or it goes space domain awareness. I need to tie those things together. I need to figure out, where that data can assist in other missions, even if it's just giving an operator better situational awareness of how to use his radar energy and what he can do to react to a potential threat. And it's just not been done in the past. Now part of that is because that strategic missile warning mission falls under STRATCOM's integrated tactical warning and attack assessment mission. Again, which when we get back into strategic warning, we talk about perfect warning, right? You'll hear the term no-fail mission a lot. And that always makes me a little nervous because if I tell people they're not allowed to fail, that ruins my whole message of risk taking, right? And so we've got to develop a no-fail system, but there are no-fail people. But we've also got to look at some of those constructs of how some of these Cold War systems were built and the processes that they were built to feed into, and we got to figure out where we can take some risks there, because those systems were designed to again provide that perfect warning. But if we stick only to that, we're already going to lose the threat, right? And so we're going to be perfect at doing a thing that's not relevant anymore, and that's no good for anybody. So I'm figuring out, how do I make some people uncomfortable? I asked my squadron commanders to make me uncomfortable so I can go make someone else uncomfortable, to really get after, what are new TTPs that we can do using the things that we have already. New technology, great, we'll weave that in as well, but using the things we have already, how can I break some glass there to be more effective at the mission as the adversary gets better?
It sounds like a great vision. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that. The missile warning mission is tightly linked with the missile defense mission. Can you envision a time when the missile defense units and capabilities are reassigned to the Space Force?
So sure. I mean, like I said, we're already supporting the missile defense radar at Cobra Dane, out at Shemya. We're already on tap to support the long-range discrimination radar. I think there's probably a good amount of work to be done to really kind of tighten those things together operationally. I was talking to my commander up at the 13th Space Warning Squadron at Clear, and we realized at one point that there was no way for the operators on the floor at the UEWR at Clear to talk secret to the operators on the floor at Cobra Dane. That's just a SIPR phone. I mean, that's some of the most basic technology we have. But it was just hadn't been a priority for somebody at some point, or maybe it had been and it just kind of languished, and that cooperation wasn't encouraged. And so now we're figuring out, we got sensors that are doing similar missions, and again, how do I bring those data streams together so that operators are supporting each other, even if they're doing different missions? Certainly the missile warning and missile defense missions are very, very closely linked, and given some of the new threats that are coming, I don't see how we meet those threats without better, intertwining those pieces together. And then when we get to the, we mentioned some of the space layer that's being looked at by the Missile Defense Agency. I don't see how that space layer doesn't have interaction with our existing space capabilities, the space-based infrared system, and then there's going to be, a constellation, next generation constellation to come. And I don't see a way that we meet those threats, again, without weaving all those things together. And then once you've got, that linkage in the space sectors and in the ground sector, then how do you bring them all together? And you've really built this kind of, all-encompassing picture. I think it's got to be done, but there's a lot of work left.
Yeah, always an opportunity for more work, I guess. Another piece that we didn't talk about, and I'm not sure if this is the forum to talk about it, is the Jtags. Is there an opportunity for the Jtags to roll in to the Space Force, or is that discussion even taking place? Or
yeah, so I know there's discussions on what's going to come into the Space Force from potentially other services. I'm not privy to those discussions. I'm not part of that, but I'll tell you, on the joint side, through the Combined Forces Space Component Commander, as the Delta IV commander, they have, I've already kind of gotten marching orders from, was previously Major General Shaw, now Lieutenant General Shaw, and now Major General Burt, who's in place as the SFA commander. They have kind of designated me as the Space Delta IV commander as kind of the lead for the missile warning, missile defense enterprise at the joint level. There's no command authority there, but really kind of a coordination authority to help them get a handle on, hey, let's have a missile warning expert that's kind of taking lead with all the other missile warning experts to solve problems together. And so we've had the 1st Brigade, Space Brigade commander up here for a tour. We've gone down there to meet with his staff. We're tightly linked with the same objectives. And as we look at problem sets, both theater and space, obviously Jtags is a theater asset, we're both committed to solving those problems together, regardless of where he gets assigned someday. It doesn't really matter to us. We're tightly intertwined under that joint hat, under SFSIC, to help the commander solve missile warning problems, right? And again, I've been asked to look not only at missile warning but missile defense problems. I think we're a little less mature there, and we're still working through who are the kind of stakeholders in that community that we've got to pull together again to look at problems from an enterprise perspective, which we really haven't done as much as you would think we would have by now.
Understand. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you sharing that. There are a lot of organizations, as you said, and there's been a lot of reorganizations. Could you talk about some of the partner organizations you're working with and the criticality of those partner organizations?
Sure. So, relationships for any organization, certainly any military organization, are always going to be key. But this really mass reorganization into the U.S. Space Force has really driven home the need to cooperate across organizations. So, within the Space Force, I've got very close partnerships with Space Delta 6 and Space Delta 7. So Space Delta 6, they provide me the 62nd Cyber Squadron, which provides my mission defense team that currently protects the entire SBIRS ground network from cyber intrusion. And now they're being asked to now spread that out and also look at all the ground-based radar networks and kind of put those all under the umbrella of their cyber protection. From Delta 7, I have a Detachment 4 of the 71st ISR Squadron. They provide all of my intel support. And they're building up a kind of missile warning intel center of excellence, if you will, which will provide intelligence analysis and support to all of my space-based units. And now they're reaching out and building that out to all the ground-based units as well, and figuring out how to lead operations through intel threat analysis. Again, both of those units are not part of my Delta. I don't rate on them. I don't own them in any way, but absolutely part of the family. I like to tell the story that when we developed our patch for Space Delta IV, we had asked the Delta, people across the Delta, hey, come up with your ideas, send them to us. We want to see what people come up with, put it together. The first day we sent it out, I go down to one of my ops intel briefings, and who's now our deck commander there, my lead intel officer, comes over and slides a piece of paper. He's like, hey, sir, came up with a patch idea. It's like, well, you're not even in my Delta. It's like, yeah, but I think this is pretty cool. And it was fantastic. And I'll tell you, most of what we came up with came from his design. And that's absolutely what I expect, that we have that very close family relationship, whether we're in the same Delta or not. And I work closely with the Delta 6 and 7 commanders to make sure that, his folks are being integrated correctly. They sit on the same crews. They are integral members of the crew. They're not just support where they come in occasionally. 24/7, I've got intel operators and cyber operators on the floor with space operators conducting missile warning operations. Additionally, garrison support is huge. Very close partners with Buckley Garrison. Having come from being what used to be the 460th Space Wing, being the vice commander, and having great relationships with the mission support group and the medical group, that's fantastic now because I know all those folks, and when I need support for my organizations, they're right there. We also sometimes need support from Peterson Schriever Garrison with my folks up at Thule, The Air Base group there is part of Peterson-Schriever Garrison. And again, I mentioned we have some operating locations at Peterson and Schriever. It's a total force effort, right? I've got guard squadrons up at Clear that provide security forces and space operators. And again, they really provide the bulk of the personnel up at Clear Air Force Station. Here at Buckley in the Space Base mission, I've got 2 associate squadrons. I've got the 4th Space Warning Squadron and the 8th Space Warning Squadron. They work, hand in hand with the SBIRS squadrons that work here at Buckley. We've talked pretty good extent about the allies, again, Australians, Canadians, and folks from the United Kingdom, key players there. We've talked a bit about the Joint Missile Warning Community, the 1st Space Brigade, the 233rd Space Group is a guard unit that we work quite closely with there. The Missile Defense Community, Missile Defense Agency, JFIC IMD. And then kind of lastly, I would say how much we rely on our relationship both with the military and industry in sustaining all of those weapon systems. Again, most of these systems have been around for a long time. We just celebrated a couple weeks ago the 50th anniversary of Defense Support Program, which is still flying, still going strong. But the infrastructure to support, a system that's 50 years old, to support those ground-based radars that are over 50 years old, it takes a heavy lift for sustainment. So we absolutely rely on the Space and Missile Systems Center, the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, and then all of our industry partners to keep figuring out ways to keep these systems not just up and running, keep the lights on, but to truly keep modernizing and becoming the sensors that we need to meet that future threat. So a lot of partners, a lot of interaction, and it's, again, in these COVID-19 times, it's a challenge that I have not gotten to see all of these people and look them in the eye and talk face to face like we're doing now. But, I look forward to when those restrictions ease up a little bit and we can continue to have, really grow those partnerships even more. But yeah, absolutely essential to what we do.
It really is a team approach to this critical national security mission that you and your entire organization provide. On behalf of the individual and corporate members of the Space Force Association, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to discuss this vitally important mission. And as a small token of our appreciation, I've got a COVID-19 mask with the SFA logo imprinted on it. And so, sir, thank you so much again for your time. And just use that as necessary, especially as we go through these times, and just have a great Space Force day. Semper Supra.
Yeah, well, like I said, I do truly appreciate the opportunity to communicate. It's so important that we communicate what we're doing. And again, I truly appreciate the efforts that, as we're standing up Space Force, you're standing up Space Force Association to support us, and it's greatly appreciated. And thanks for taking the time to ask me some challenging questions and allow me to communicate some answers to you. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks.